To say Domination mode had a mixed reaction on release would be an understatement, though the same could be said of Warhammer 3 as a whole. Creative Assembly has shown a willingness to improve both the 1.1 update addressing a host of issues across campaign and multiplayer. Though the updates may not come at the pace we would like, progress is progress, right? Right? I also want Domination and Warhammer 3 to improve, and the best, most effective way for me to give feedback is in video form, or so I've been told. It seems we have plenty of time to provide feedback. Today, I want to go over my top 5 improvements to Domination. The most glaring issue for me from the start has been the lack of maps. Creative Assembly already added 2 new maps to Domination in 1.1 based on our suggestions, both from Warhammer 2. Ideally, every major update would add a couple of new maps to the pool, slowly building a greater variety of maps over time. These maps could be from Warhammer 1 and 2 land battles, FFAs, plus some new handmade bespoke maps to match the theme of whatever DLC they come alongside. Help bolster these numbers though, and to drive community interaction, the official modding tools should support the creation of new Domination maps downloadable via the workshop. While the assembly kit has yet to appear, enabling this functionality when it does would greatly improve the availability of quality maps. As to what makes a quality map, the success of the Battle of It's a Map shows relatively open fields can work decently for Domination. Certainly having some maps with more impassable terrain is nice for variety, and I think both styles of maps should be in the rotation and featured in tournaments. Maps should avoid having too much confined space and give plenty of opportunities for outflanking. Choke points are okay, as long as they have a way around. Unfortunately, there's no way to see around the army reinforcement panel except to close it. I mean, seriously, who approved this design? The user interface for Domination needs serious work in general, starting with this little dread box right here. There's no question it needs to be moved and resized, but where to? I propose something over here to fit between magic and army abilities, or perhaps you have a little drop down from the top like this, but covering one of the most important parts of the army panel is not acceptable. It cannot stay here. Something that has moved but shouldn't have is this panel right here, showing army value damage, supply, and the number of units summoned for all players. Sure, it's here now. When I go to cast this battle later, it won't show up during the replay. From a casting and analysis perspective, having this information is hugely helpful in trying to figure out, for example, how in Urson's Balls your opponent had so many units at the end. You were 5,000 behind on army value. An improvement to help analysis in battle on replays in all situations, having a mouse over breakdown on each victory point, showing every unit affecting it and their quote-unquote capture power. Something I struggled with greatly while learning Domination was figuring out what was going on with the capture, why it was or wasn't being capped by one side or another. For newer players, it could help flatten the learning curve. As for casting, it would add a level of drama and spectacle as we could comment on just how close that player is to finishing the capture. Also on casting, the reinforcements for all players should be visible somewhere for spectators and on replays. There's a reason I start every Domination video on the replay select screen. It's the only place to show the entire build before the battle starts. Not exactly an elegant solution by any means, and it gets extra janky for live casting events as I have to hide the screen while I spy builds before players load in. Ideally, spectators should be able to click a player's unit, have the reinforcement panel pop up for viewing only. Remember, we moved it over here. They could then see all the units in reserve, including those on quote-unquote cooldown. Speaking of said cooldown, I had planned to suggest for it to get longer, but Creative Assembly beat me to it with 1.2 update. While I need to play and watch a ton more games to really solidify an opinion, first impressions say it does feel better. That said, if the Convalescence cooldown was longer, proportional to the unit's cost, it would take much longer to get more expensive, powerful units back on the field, while still allowing you to reinforce with cheaper support units should you need to. Killing those powerful units would still feel like it actually mattered. Likewise, units with limited use abilities should probably not get those recharged when they die or get retreated. This is known as the cultist issue, but it will only grow with extremely powerful limited use heals, summons, and more on Warhammer 1 and 2 factions. While I'm sure some would love to see Naked Alariel, no one wants a Naked Alariel casting 6 to 8 stars of Avalorn against them over the course of a Domination battle because she kept getting retreated and resummoned. One last point about retreating. Right now, demons and undead have a huge advantage in that their units get completely wiped out rather than shatter, well, among other things. Shattered mortal units can take a long time to exit the battlefield, meaning they take several times longer to resummon. If it's possible, shattered mortal units should automatically be retreated, not refunding any points, but immediately starting their convalescence cooldown. Now that the deaths of limited units are more meaningful, let's talk about the limits themselves. While this isn't strictly limited to Domination, I do think it's time to update the unit caps with a few new categories to better align with commonly used tournament rule sets. First, about single entities. All single entities should be limited to 5 total per army. This includes any single model unit, lord, hero, monster, except support units with no ability to deal damage, like the Grail Reliquary or a non-hero mount corpse cart. Next, add a new classification for top-tier single entities costing more than 1,700 points called Epic Single Entities. These would be limited to 2 and would also include monstrous mounts, which increase the character's base cost past 1,700. Also, while it would take a lot of work, unit variations should also be taken into consideration. For example, in the community-created fruit rules for land battles, you can't take more than 8 of a unit, including variants. So, for example, you could take 4 Marauder Spears and 4 Marauder Whips, or 2 of each of those plus 4 anti-infantry Marauders. But you couldn't take 3 of each of those. That would be 9 in total. See what I'm saying? Finally, these community rules also have some cost-based caps as well. If a unit costs over a certain amount, you can take less of them, depending on the unit type as well. Let's take infantry as an example. If an infantry costs 900 points or less, you can take 5. If an infantry costs between 901 to 1100, you can take 4. And if it costs 1101 plus, you can take only 3. All these changes work together to promote varied builds and prevent spam of OP units. In a game as huge as Warhammer 3 will be one day, there will always be brokenly powerful things, no matter how well Creative Assembly balances everything. Putting in place more stringent unit caps helps future-proof the game for the absolute deluge of content to come. Speaking of points cost, let's finish today's video talking about big picture value. Creative Assembly has already tweaked the army values to give a larger starting army, changed the supply income base rate, and reworked the catch-up mechanic. I would want and expect Creative Assembly to continue to fine-tune these values as the patches roll on, based on player feedback. While the experience of Domination will always be subjective, no doubt, finding the sweet spot on these mechanics will cement its place within the multiplayer community. While some people always prefer land battles, and that's totally fine, getting Domination to the right place could convince many holdouts to at least play it as a change of pace. Can Creative Assembly rise to the challenge and create the multiplayer experience Domination was intended to be? Only time will tell. These are my suggestions, though, to help them reach that goal, but what about you? Leave your feedback in the comments down below. That's all for today. For more Warhammer 3 home improvement content, subscribe, click that notification bell, give the video a like, share it if you found it useful or informative. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.